Hey everyone, we're super excited about this episode. We spoke with Taylor Amrani, also known as Life by Taylor, back in September of 2022. Taylor is a spiritual teacher, podcast host, mindfulness and meditation instructor. She's been traveling the world and sharing all of her insight on social media. This was an awesome conversation full of motivation, insight, and encouragement. So without further ado, here is Facing Your Fears with Taylor Amrani. Hey, Taylor.
Hey, guys.
Hey, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you guys for having me.
Great to see you. So we've been following along your journey for a little bit now, and the reason we wanted to speak with you is because we're starting off with season 2 in our podcast, and season 2 for us is about talking to people who we think are living authentically, living true to themselves, despite all the fear that's out there in society. And we thought your experience and story would be great to talk about. So I kind of just want to hear, I know right now you're traveling, right? You're in Austria, I think, and then you're going to India. So how did you get here? How did that happen?
Yeah, wow. It's interesting because it's always like, where do you start from when someone asks you this, I'll start from where, I was born and raised in LA. I grew up constantly feeling like I don't fit into the environment that I'm in. It was very, LA, superficial, ego-based environment. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know any other path to find peace in that environment. So I was just constantly in resistance and anger. I was always upset. I hated people. I really hated people. I didn't like people. I was just not a happy person, which is funny when you see me today to think of me that way.
Yeah,
and that's why people who grew up with me are always like, your biggest success story is just people who've seen you, like who you were and who you are now. But yeah, I grew up in LA, felt really not compatible with the environment I was raised in. I was raised in a traditional home that was not about mental health or spirituality or any of that. Definitely not. My dad still thinks therapy is not real. So,
same with my dad.
We're still there. Okay. And I had a lot of struggles growing up, also in my social groups and also at home. My parents were challenging figures. And when I was 18, I was like, okay, I have to get out of here. I have to dip. Like, I need to start a new life. So the only place that I felt like I could go was Israel. I had all of my dad's family there, and I said bye. I almost didn't graduate high school, so I was definitely not going to college. Left to Israel. I actually drafted into the army. Not from a place of not from a place of ideology or religion or any of that. It was just like, this might save me from myself. I just believed that adversity would teach me about myself, that I would grow into a different person. So it was completely selfish. I was just doing it for that reason. I went into the army, learned new things, started a new life, and realized, wow, I'm not what everyone said I was. Like, I was considered a bad student. I was considered stupid. My classmates used to make fun of me and tell me that I'm not smart. I was always being bullied for different things. And in the army, I was taught, wow, you can reinvent yourself. You can find out more things about yourself. And I think that experience was the first time I saw that you can change. Like, who you are is not set for life. Like, you can completely become a new person, or I would say more of yourself, more of your authentic self. And it was addicting. I was like, okay, on to the next thing. Let's do it again. So after the army, I was like, okay, I want to prove to myself that I can go to school, because I always had D's and F's and was considered this terrible student. So I signed up for university and was like, let's see how this goes. The first day of school, I dropped out. I messaged them and said, hi, I don't think I'm smart enough to be here. I don't belong here. But then I picked myself up, got back to focusing on this mindset of like growth and personal development. And I ended up being an honors student, and I ended up being top of my class and realizing, whoa, okay, like, you really can be whoever you want to be and whoever you decide to be. After school, I was going to go to law school. My dad was like, you're going to be a lawyer. My whole life, he was like, go be a lawyer. And now that I was doing good in school, it was more promising. So I was like, yes, let's go be a lawyer. And I know that way too well. Before I was like, this is going to be me proving myself to the people I grew up with. I'm going to be considered smart and successful, and my dad's going to be proud. And all really linked back to my ego. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a lawyer or a doctor or any of those things, of course, but it all depends on why you're going into those fields. Mine was not coming from a good place. It was coming from a place to prove something to people and myself. Luckily, I didn't do well on the LSAT. And I just kind of told my dad, let me just do me. And obviously a lot of things happened from then until now, but it's been this constant journey of I will not settle for less than what makes me feel free, what I enjoy. That life's too short. I want to be of service to others in a way that feels good to me. And we can get into it, but just one thing led to the next. I worked at a pharmaceutical company. I tried corporate life. I worked at Netflix. I did all these different things. And then I found my thing. I was like, I have always been passionate about feeling better and taking radical accountability for myself, outgrowing past versions of myself, finding peace on my own. And why not turn that into a business and monetize that? And that's where we're at today. So I'm sure as we go through the questions, I'll have more answers about how I got here, but that's just the general picture of how I got here.
Wow. That sounds right. Like your 20s, I would say, are definitely a time to live out, I think, other people's dreams a lot of the times, or live out proving traumas or things that have happened to you wrong. So I resonate with what you said. You're like, well, I'm going to be a lawyer because that's going to prove to myself like I'm really smart and capable, and everyone's going to see that. And I think it's so easy to get caught up in that. Hey, and some people actually want that, and that's great, but not everyone wants that. People want those things, like those specific kinds of things, for like what you said, the wrong reasons, because it's proving your worth in a way.
Exactly.
And it gets to a point where you're like, you can realize that when you get more in touch with who you are. And it sounds like what your motivator was always self-growth.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you can easily land into those really challenging careers that do cause yourself to continuously grow and push yourself, but you're not doing it. I mean, you probably realize, like, I'm not doing this for myself. Like, the reality is like you took that growth mindset and you turned it into something you could do for yourself, and it's going to have a more fulfilling outcome. So I think that's a huge reckoning that happens in your like late 20s, which seems like, I'm guessing that's where you're at, or you've surpassed a little bit. Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So, and I think Sophie can like also touch in on this.
I mean, it's so interesting. I have like so many questions, but I guess the first question I want to kind of ask is, so we're talking about self-growth, right? And like how Daisy mentioned, you can feel self-growth when you're in a career, kind of like chasing, moving up the ladder, moving up the corporate world. You're getting that dopamine, you're getting all that drive. What does it feel like to you to feel like I'm getting self-growth within based on what you want versus something that's, you could still get like a job? Like, how do you separate that? What does that feel like to you?
Perfect question, because I was just going to say, as you spoke and with your question, that before I framed self-growth as an external thing, as something that is like an external accomplishment to prove to me what I am internally. And I would say that in that chapter of my life, I was focused on self-growth. Today, I'm much more settled in self-acceptance, this like radical self-acceptance, and coming back to my truest self and recognizing that she's not always a hustler, and she's not always smart, and she's not always amazing, but she's still worth love and peace and acceptance, and she doesn't need to earn it. Before, I needed to earn my self-worth. I needed to hustle to be loved by myself, to be loved by other people. Today, I feel like I am perfect as I am in every phase, in every stage, in every way. And I was also in the past. And I think that the difference, to answer your question, is, am I focused on growth from a place of ego, from a place of earning worth? Or am I focused on growth as in, how can I free myself more so I can settle more into acceptance? That's how I would frame it today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think that when you separate it that way, you realize that they might seem similar on the surface, but when you go to the core root of why you're doing it, you realize they're completely different.
Exactly.
And you mentioned that, so your dad wanted you to be a lawyer. It's funny because I'm a lawyer now. So I totally understand like the path, the pressure, what that's like. But I want to hear from you. And I was listening to, I think maybe it was on your podcast where you talk about the importance of recognizing, number one, accepting your parents, but also recognizing that you're no longer your parents' child at some age. I come from a very, very close-knit family. I totally understand what that's like. I understand the pressure. I understand wanting to be someone for them. I understand the guilt also, right? It's not easy. So I kind of want to hear from you about like, how has this process been for you becoming true to yourself at the risk of disappointing your parents?
Yeah, I think this is like the biggest theme of my life because my dad is really one of the most dominant figures, not only in my life, just in general, that I know in this world. And, you know, he's very driven by his fear, very, very protective, very focused on worst case scenario, go down the safest route. You know, he is an immigrant. He worked so hard to achieve financial success and stability for us. And that comes with a lot of trauma. That comes with a lot of things that I have compassion for looking at it today as an adult. But of course, I absorbed a lot of that growing up, and that was brought onto me as a child. I think that actually, as I rewatched that video that I made yesterday about the parents, I realized that there is a part of us that will never leave our childhood home. I remember I read a book that said, we're not birds. We don't fly from the nest. We're turtles. We carry the home with us for life. Like the home we were born in, we will carry with us forever. So to an extent, of course, I will always exist in my childhood home on some level. The relationship I have to that home is something else. But the concept is to understand that my dad thinks he knows what's best for me, right? He truly is doing it from a place of love. No matter how aggressive it is, no matter how much it can be seen as mean or harsh or even just abusive sometimes, really just trying to push me in his direction. I used to be angry and resentful for him, but I realized that it's his love for me. It's his way of seeing the world. That is his language of saying, I love you so, so much. And this is what I think is best for you. That being said, there's a certain point in your journey where if you recognize that your best is not aligned with what they think is the best for you, that you have to give up on the short-term bond or love or comfort in that relationship for long-term to save that relationship in the long term. You will resent your parent. You will not have a good relationship with your parent. You know, I always told myself, really disobeying my dad or disrespecting my dad, right? I don't like to call it that because it's actually obeying myself and respecting myself. But what it felt like was disobeying him and disrespecting him. At least he saw it that way, which made it even harder. I remember telling myself, I'd rather him be upset now and me go on my path because I know that once I'm good, really, he'll be happy. Then go to law school, build a whole life because I'm afraid of him and because I want to please him. And even when he passes, I will still resent him. I will still resent him even once he's gone, not even while he's here. Our relationship will not be good in my mind and heart and my soul. So it's a sacrifice that's not easy to do. I would say it's one of the most challenging things I've done in my life. But speaking from the other side of it, where today my dad isn't thrilled with what I do in life, but he has come into acceptance of it. He sees that I'm genuinely happy. He sees that I can be financially independent, and he is definitely less resistant than he used to be. And we have a better relationship now too, because it doesn't come at the expense of my own authentic self, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And part of that journey of untangling what you want from what your parents want for you is realizing that your parents, like, their ideology is also your ideology as a kid. And whether you want to have that ideology as an adult, like, you have that. It's a part of you. It's like you have their voices in your head. And I want to know about, like, at what point did you start realizing, like, the ideologies that I was raised with from my parents, that they told me this is the way the world is, this is how I should view it, directly goes against what I innately see the world as, or how I want to interact with the world. At what age did you start to become aware of that?
Yeah. I mean, I always make this joke where I say that when I decided not to go to law school, I killed my dad's dream. And when I decided to be a life coach, I was his worst nightmare, because he's like really anything but that, truly. Like, really, that was his mindset. Like, I grew up with him talking shit about people who do things like I'm doing now. So you can imagine that voice in my head. Oh, so hard. It was with me with every session, every coaching client. And the thing is that voice was strong, but my deeper self's voice was stronger, just a little stronger, not much stronger. It was heavy. It was hard in the beginning. And it took a long time for me to accept that I'm good at what I do, that I can do this for a living, that I can be respected, that I can be taken seriously. And I think still till this day, what you're saying is true, that there's a Taylor inside of me that still thinks that what my dad says is right. And that's because, like I said, we're carrying that childhood home with us for life. But I've made peace with that part of me as well and said, I know where it comes from. I understand. When did this happen? I would say that just as I started deciding that I want to be a life coach and realizing how much he was against it. When I say against it, he literally would say to me, like, you're not welcome at home until you get a real job or go to school. Like, it was that bad. It was like, I don't even want to be talking to you. Like, I just kept persisting. And I realized with time that I love what I do too much. You know, I think it's something that people can relate to when it comes to sexuality and other things as well. If their parents are against it, there's just a part of you that knows that this is who you are. There's nothing that you can't change it. I can't. Even if I wanted to change it, I cannot change what I believe I was brought on this earth to do. So it's worth every cost. You know, I just don't see it any other way around it.
Totally. I like what you said about, like, it's not about his judgments going away. It's just about your confidence and circle growing bigger than that little one of his. And I think that's so important to recognize, because it's so easy to want to, like, be like, okay, I'll never have that judgment. I'll never have those fears. But no, you will. You're his daughter. Of course. Like,
I still do right now.
Yeah. Right. Or right now. Right. We're talking about it. And I think it's like, once you realize that you can have so much freedom that comes, that you realize that you can move forward by not so much like fighting with the parent or disagreeing with them, but understanding that you have to focus on, like, where what you truly feel deep down. And of course, I can resonate what you said about sexuality. I mean, my parents took a very long time to understand it. My dad is still struggling with it. And there is a really hard component of figuring out, like, do I actually want this? So I think it's amazing that you actually took the leap to figure out that. I'm sure at the beginning it was like, oh, do I want this? And then you kind of seemed like you ripped the Band-Aid off. You started doing things. You went to the Army. You know, you started challenging yourself. And it sounds like with that, as you challenged yourself, as you went deeper with yourself, it allows you to connect more with you. And slowly his judgments, not that they went away, but they were less loud.
Right. I think it's not even, you know, so they get loud again too, you know, like I want to, in a general day-to-day basis, they've become less loud, but there's times where it's triggered and they're louder than they were before, and my voice becomes so small again. And it just starts, I think it all comes back to acceptance. Accepting that this is who my dad is, accepting that that part of me will always be a part of me, and moving anyways, and doing what I feel is true to me anyways. And I think when people ask me, like, how I'm so brave and courageous, because it really took a lot of courage. That's the word that comes to mind when I think of that entire journey. I say, I always played out the alternative and realized it would be harder. And that's what I think people fail to do. That the alternative is actually much scarier than disobeying my dad in the present. I don't want to make it to 50, 60, 70 years old and realize that I was a lawyer for 40 years and knew the whole time that I don't want to be a lawyer. Like, I don't want to wake up then. I don't want to have to go through that pain then. So I think it comes back to avoiding pain in the present just prolongs it and deepens it. It doesn't actually get rid of it, even if you can pretend. You know, I could have went to law school. I told my dad once, I was like, do you think I don't think of just, like, making my life easier and just doing what you say so that I can have peace? Like, do you not just, like, think about this for a second? Like, I love school. I would just go to school and you'd be happy. Like, I'd have peace of mind. But I refuse to do that because I will hate you in 5-10 years from now. I will hate you because I will blame you for not living my truth.
That's powerful. And part of it is like, obviously what we water grows. So if you were to water all of these things, these ideologies about becoming a lawyer that your dad told you, if you, like, went along with it, like, that's just going to grow bigger. Whereas if you follow your intuition and life coaching is what you're doing, and the more you do that, the deeper you get into it, the stronger the confidence builds around it. And, like, right now, like, I see you, I'm like, oh, she's traveling around the world. How long have you been traveling? That seems like another level of jumping off to go deeper into, like, what's scary for you, but what feels real.
Facing the fear.
Wow. A year ago, I I was in a relationship. I just moved into a nice new apartment that I completely like renovated with my then boyfriend. And I bought a new car. Like I was like roots like in the ground. And I remember a friend of mine was like, I think I'm going to leave Israel. And it triggered me. Like I just started hysterically crying, not because she was leaving, but because it spoke to some part of myself that felt like I also want to leave. And I noticed
a friend that you like grew up with, like a friend who's lived there forever?
No, it was just like a friend that was like, after a while was like, hey, I think I'm just going to follow my intuition and leave. And I was always afraid to leave because I created this whole life there and it was now my comfort zone. It was my safety. It was where I considered myself like a big fish in a small tank. And I had this inner knowing that I want to travel and I want to see the world. And so much so that I remember I was watching Eat, Pray, Love and it triggered me. Like I was like, I can't watch this. And I just turned it off.
Oh my
because
God.
I knew when I watched it that I need to break up with my boyfriend and just do it. And I didn't want to know. I didn't want to see the truth. So being myself, when I recognize this truth within myself, I'm patient with myself, but I don't lie to myself. I saw in that week, I was like, okay, this made me cry. I couldn't watch this. There's a reason for this. I always say step one is being radically honest with yourself. You don't have to act on that truth immediately. That scares people. People are afraid to admit the truth because they think that means they have to do something about it. Start with just admitting it to yourself, becoming comfortable with it, recognizing it, and not bullshitting yourself. People are really good at bullshitting themselves. I could have watched that and been like, oh, maybe it's just because I'm just not in the mood to watch this movie. But I knew I would not be able to watch the movie.
Who doesn't want to watch Eat, Pray, Love?
Right? Exactly. It's the best. So fun fact, Elizabeth Gilbert was in my mom's high school class. I found that out like 2 weeks ago. It was exciting for me.
That's
so the
cool.
woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, I know. I'm like,
awesome.
there must be some sort of connection, like her energy, like trickled down. But anyways, I recognized that. And like I say, first admit the truth to yourself. I ended my relationship. That was step one. I didn't think about traveling then. I just knew that that's probably something that's bringing me closer to truth. And luckily, that was a beautiful uncoupling. And I actually came here. I booked this vacation last year to Austria with my then boyfriend. We said, let's start being digital nomads because it was a calling of mine. But I knew I wanted to go alone, but I couldn't break up with him yet. So we booked this vacation. And when we ended things, I said to him, listen, I think I'm still going to go. And he was like, go. I was like, great. But I'm so scared to travel alone. Like I was freaking out. Even just traveling in Europe to Austria, I was hysterical, like freaking out, like anxiety because I had never traveled alone. I didn't trust myself to travel alone. Came here for 2 weeks, had an incredible time, and highly recommend if you ever go through a breakup in life to get out of your regular environment alone for a little bit. It's actually probably the best thing you could do for yourself. And came back to Israel, realized, okay, I think now that I'm alone and I don't have this apartment and this car and this guy, I should go back to LA. And my dad said, you're not welcome here doing what you do for a living. So I said, okay, then I'll go to Costa Rica. And I got on a flight, went to LA. I was supposed to travel a week later to Costa Rica, but I ended up having a really deep heart-to-heart with my dad, and the most honest I've ever been with him. I just told him how it makes me feel. Like he treats me like I'm a criminal, like I'm doing something wrong, like I'm killing people, but I'm really just helping them, and how much I need his love and support, and how much I miss having him to support me. And if he could just offer the same support he would offer me if I was a lawyer as a life coach, how much better my life would be. I could be successful. And he said, okay, I'll give you 1 year. I'll give you 1 year where I don't say anything. Let's see what happens.
Wow.
Yeah,
1 year.
I was like, 1 year, I'll take it. Like
it's a bargain.
Right? I was like, thank you. I'll take whatever I can get. 1 month would have been good. So he says that, and I follow my intuition to stay in LA, even though I booked things in Costa Rica. I paid for things already. Another important lesson: when life guides you somewhere, like the logistics, do not go somewhere because you planned because of the plan. Like I felt deeply called to stay, I felt deeply called to stay. And I was like, who cares about the money I'm going to lose and the things I booked? Like, I know I need to be here now and heal this relationship with my father, have him see what I do for a living. It'll help me. So I stayed in LA, and then 1 second, I just pulled this out of my ear. I stayed in LA. And I thought I was going to be in LA for a year. But once I started to feel like my dad's more comfortable with what I do, I was working on my relationship with my mom. I felt really good in LA. I said, my time has come to travel. I just feel deeply called. I was meditating, And consistently this thing was coming up for me, go to India, go to India, go to India. And I was like, I don't want to go to India. I don't want to go to India. I'm afraid of India. I'm scared of India. I don't want to go to India. It's not for me. Like arguing with my intuition. But I knew, knowing myself, that whatever my intuition says, no matter how hard it is for me, eventually I'm going to align with it. So I booked a flight after going to this reading, and this guy told me the same thing. He said, you should go to India. I was like, okay, that's it. Done.
Okay.
Game over. Let's go. Went home, just searched something, booked it. And I got an opportunity to come here to Austria as a resident to do meditation classes first. So I was like, let's start there. Let's start traveling again. Let's see what's up. And I'll be in India in October, but I'm actually going to Ecuador before India, which is like a whole different other story. But yeah, we're just traveling.
That's amazing. So much to say there. I think in general, like there's such a shadow, like so much about fear we're talking about here. Like number one with your dad, finally he sees you living here, he strips away that fear. He starts to see, wait, that's my daughter. She's actually happy. She's actually doing things she loves. It doesn't need to be as scary as I think it is. And it's interesting, a completely different situation with a parallel to how you feel scared to go to India. Fear. I think that fear plays such a huge role. But like, with now going to India, it's like, you thinking how you don't want to go to India. It sounds so scary, but there's a part of you that does. So like, I just want to hear from you about like, what's your relationship with fear? What do you feel about it? Like, how do you work through the logic, like how logical fear is and how much it stunts us from getting to where we need to go?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people this all the time. I'm still so scared about going to India. Like, I literally wake up sometimes in the middle of the night here in Austria. Like, am I actually going to go? Like, am I actually going to do this? And it's kind of like when it really reminds me, because I used to go to summer camp and we used to go to theme parks all the time. And I remember I was really scared of roller coasters, but somehow I would convince myself to get on them anyways. And I would always tell myself, once the seat is buckled, like, that's it, like game, like you have no choice. Like all the thoughts, all the anxieties, like are irrelevant. Like you have this moment of realization where you're like, I can't get off and I'm not getting off. And I feel like I just try to get myself to that point. So like I realize, okay, I'm so scared. I just have to book the flight, get on the airplane, and then I'm already there. And usually you find out that your fears are bullshit. And like most of the time, they're not rational and they're not actually protecting you. They're really just robbing you of some of the best experiences and things in life. And you build evidence. And this evidence that you start to build throughout your life of all the times you overcame your fears and they were bullshit helps you the next time. When I go to India now and my mind is like, don't go, don't go, don't go, don't go. I think of all the times I was afraid of doing this and doing that. And I actually tell people to have like a list on their phone of small things they do in a day that like scare them, that they do anyways. And just like keep tabs of it, have like a list of like the evidence, actually write it down so that when they're making a scary choice, they can go back to it and be like, right, yeah, all of this wouldn't happen if I were to listen to my fears. So I think it's just feeling it and doing it anyways.
Yeah, I think there's this like saying of like, we don't know what's best for us.
No, we don't.
We don't. Because like hard no. It is a hard no, because I think what that really means is that there's like, we have an innate feeling to do something, and then like our brains get in the way and they tell us like 100 reasons why you shouldn't do that. And then you kind of get, if you don't take action, you get paralyzed by those thoughts of like why you can't do this. And that's why, like, just like kind of from your experience, like one step after another, it's like every step you take in the right direction is going to lead you to ultimately where you want to be. And
exactly.
Like, something else you said was, it's like accepting these fears. It's not saying that you have to go and act on them, but like it's taking one step at a time. And I think that's like the weirdest thing to look back on your 20s. I found my journal from like 2017, and it somehow like weirdly captured like each year of my life, like when I was in college, like my junior year, my senior year, first year into living and working in New York. And it's like, when you're able to see that, you're like, wow, every decision that I've made has led me to exactly where I am now. In the moment, like you're beating yourself up. You're thinking this is not where I should be, but it's exactly where you should be. It just takes time to figure out and have like an actual reaction of feeling like you are in the right place.
For sure. I think also I try to trick myself, because I think that when you want to go, let's say, for example, for me to go to India, I tell myself I can always decide not to go. Just start looking for schools, and then start maybe buy a ticket that's refundable, and then just let time. Like I try to trick myself and I don't just trick myself. I can decide not to go. That's the truth. Like everything, you can change your mind 1,000 times, right? You can say, oh, I want to explore this part of myself and it's not for me. For example, something that I really admire about my ex and that I talk about a lot, and that just I spoke to him yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind, is that when we broke up, he wanted to explore his sexuality. And I did a whole episode on this on my podcast, and people were like, and he made a post about it on Instagram, and people were like, Taylor, how do you feel about this? I'm like, I'm proud of him. I think it's amazing that he's courageous enough to try. And he tried and he realized, wow, like I actually am more into women, but I'm so happy I freed myself and let myself go there because I was so afraid of trying. So we were talking about yesterday how so many people, because of their fears, they think that it like defines something about them to explore them, or to go to India means like I actually have to stay there. Like I have to commit to this program. It's like freeing yourself enough to quiet the fears enough to just try things and be courageous enough to explore yourself and unlearn things and see who am I really. So for him, he came back to realizing, oh, I'm so happy I freed myself. He said, I think I wanted to explore it because it was so not allowed in my mind. I was so programmed to see that as not okay. And I told him, I feel like so many men feel like you and will never in their lifetime free themselves enough to explore that part of themselves. And I just admire that about him, right? It's not about in what area of your life. I just really admire people who are able to recognize where they're afraid and say, okay, if this isn't life or death and there's something calling me to this, let's explore it. Let's taste it. Let's try it. I can go to India and be so scared that I want to leave and
leave.
It probably won't happen, but I just remind myself that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really interesting technique that you use of saying, I'm going to book this ticket to India because I really want to go, but I'm also going to make sure that it's like fully refundable. Because when you get to that point of saying like, oh, like I don't have to go, if you want to go, like you're going to want to go. It's like flipping the quarter and it's like, do I have heads or tails? Like I know what I want. So
exactly.
And I think regarding like your ex-boyfriend, I think part of like exploring any part of your identity, whether it is sexuality, whether it is career path, whether it is traveling and doing all of these things, it always leads back to the same ability to challenge yourself and to accept who you are. The overlying or the overlapping connection is that you learn to trust yourself more than anyone else's voice, which is very hard to do. But the answer is that you do it bit by bit, and activity by activity, and day by day, honestly.
With curiosity, right? People want such certainty. Like they want to know, like a woman called me yesterday, or we had a one-on-one call, and she is 17 years she has a private dentist practice, and she's 44 years old. And she's calling me and saying, I feel called to go to India to the same school you're going to for a 6-day thing. Should I go? Should I not go? I said, do you want to try it? Like, go try it. Like, you don't have to know for sure that it's the best choice that you're going to make in your life. Like, it's actually, speaking of Eat, Pray, Love, there's an amazing episode on Oprah's podcast with Elizabeth Gilbert. I think it's called A Curiosity-Driven Life, where she says, I take back everything I said about finding your passion. And I really want people to just understand that life is about being curious, passionately curious, and trying things and tasting them and finding out what's for you, what's not for you. Like you said, if it's in your career path, your sexuality, your spiritual path, it's just trying things. I've tried so many things on my spiritual path that I'm like, this doesn't speak to me. This doesn't align with who I am, but I'm so happy I tried it. And now I know what does, and it strengthens what does.
Yeah.
So removing the weight from these decisions. And if there's a calling, to just trust that you're curious. You just have to be curious. Replace knowing with curiosity.
Why do you think there's so much like certainty and that people box themselves out into in society that no one can take a risk because they're so scared of, oh my God, like my life's going to be awful if I do. And I think what we're saying here is like, it doesn't work that way. You have control over your life. So do you think that people just don't see that they have control? Yes, it's fear, but like, let's go deeper.
I think people
like,
think that
fear?
the outcome is final. I think they think an outcome is final. And I just don't see that. I see that even if the worst case scenario happens, I can get up, shift, and create a completely different reality from that. So I think people are constantly afraid that whatever outcome they're going to produce, they're going to be stuck in for life. It's forever. And life doesn't work like that. Most of us make the most out of every situation. So just, you might as well try and fall and get back up. And actually looking back on my life, it's been the more difficult things that created more growth and wisdom and inspiration. And, that's where I actually gained the most. So I don't fear those challenges anymore. I think people are really afraid of pain, and avoiding pain is a more painful experience. Like I said before, if you're constantly avoiding pain, then you're actually creating a pain of anxiety and fear and closing yourself to this world. So I think it's a combination of fearing pain and also the outcome. I think also people are afraid of, what will people say if I said I'm going to go to India and I don't go to India anymore, right? Or, I said I'm going to write a book and I decided that it's not the right time for me. And so many people would write the book because they said they're going to write the book. And I don't see why people are so afraid of changing their mind, changing their path. It's like we're taught to have like a linear path, like a template that just makes sense. But life is just not like that. It doesn't make any sense.
No, it's not. And for me, like, that reminds me of my favorite poem I ever read. I found it when I was like 21 years old. And the whole idea of the poem was, it was by Bianca Sparrow. She writes for Thought Catalog, but it was titled How to Ruin Your Life Without Realizing That You're Even Doing It.
Wow.
And it sectioned it into different areas. One of the sections was, what is this need to first be like somebody's versus like somebody's? And, why do we feel like we need to be with people just to be with someone, to be dating someone just to be with someone? And that was just one component. And basically ended with, love and life are intrinsically linked. We have to tap into like what we actually want to do and our purpose on this earth, in order to also find someone who really motivates us and loves us. And these things, they can't be detached. You have to be doing both in order to have like a fulfilling life. And that always just spoke to me, because the whole point was like, you can backtrack, you can do this. And it was like the first time that I ever saw that, because when you're in college, it's like, oh, you can't change your major. You're going to graduate in 5 years. You can't do this. There's going to be repercussions. There's going to be horrible things. You're going to graduate at 24 instead of 23. Your life's over. It's ruined.
Right.
And when you're so young and you don't have like a much life experience, you think what these authority figures is what they're telling you is true.
Right.
So you don't know otherwise. And you're kind of taught to listen to their voice more than yours.
100%.
So that's where getting out of traditional learning and challenging yourself in your own ways becomes so important when you're in your early and mid 20s, because that's where you're really going to learn about yourself and learn about who you are, to be able to you say, hey, it's okay if I make these mistakes, because that is going to get me where I want to get. And if I don't get there, at least I tried. And that's better
100%.
Knowing. It's better knowing than anything else.
Even if you realize this in your 30s or in your 40s, you're blessed, because so many people have lived entire lives not realizing any of these truths. So it doesn't even matter where you're at, what age you are. The soul, it doesn't have an age. And I truly believe we all arrive at these things at the time that we're meant to. I would say that, at this point in life, I'm 28 and I'm not married and I'm traveling, and my income isn't something that's so promised. Every month I have to hustle and create new clients. I don't consider it hustling, because I've actually learned that the less effort I put, the more I attract the people and the clients and the money and all of that, which is a whole different thing. But there are moments where I have these like freak out moments where I'm like, wait, maybe I'm the crazy one. And wait, maybe these people know something I don't. And one day I'm going to regret this path. But then I realize but every single day I feel good and I'm happy and I'm fulfilled. And what is life if it's not these present moments? It's almost like I'm waiting for that day to come where I realize like, oh shit, maybe they were right and I was wrong. But as time passes, I realize it's the opposite. That I feel more confident that I'm doing it the right way. But again, it still comes up for me. I just wanted to say that like this conditioning of like, there's a template for life is so deeply embedded into my mind as well, that it comes up for me, but I just don't see any other choice. I'm not gonna feed into that. I'm not gonna change my life based on that fear. I think once you unpack what these voices are, where they're coming from, it's easier to say, okay, this voice is there, but I'm not going to make a choice based on this voice. Just like this voice says, go to India. I'm going to take action that's linked to this voice, but I'm not going to take action that's linked to that voice. But they're both there always.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to following your voice, it can be really, really tricky, but it's not tricky at all, because that is what you're going to see in the end is exactly what you're supposed to follow.
Exactly.
And I had something else I was going to say, but I'm totally blanking on it. Do you have anything you want to say?
I was just curious. I was going to ask you, how has your relationship with money changed throughout this process? Because you were just talking about like, making money and not hustling. And I'm definitely at the point where I'm like, money is just paper we all use that's dictated every single one of our lives, and it locks us, it boxes us. So like, how do you view money?
Yeah, I'll be fully honest and say that in every chapter of my life, there's something that I know I have to heal and focus on and work on. And right now, it's really obvious to me that that's one of them, if not the main one that I'm focused on right now. I mean, I think at first it was get a job that's going to provide stability and that you're going to have like financial security, because if not, then you're being irresponsible and it's not the right way. And obviously coming from an immigrant household and coming from America, I was always in that like capitalist mindset of like, you have to make six figures and you want this to be successful, whatever. With time, I've changed my relationship with money, realizing that I don't need as much as I think I do when I'm genuinely fulfilled, that I need less things, which brings me immense and deep comfort, because I realize I don't necessarily know what I would do with six figures at this point in my life, because I really have everything I need. And I needed more things when I was unfulfilled. Yeah. I needed that vacation that's at that nice hotel, and I needed the Gucci bag, and I needed these things that I just genuinely, if I had the money, I wouldn't spend on. Yeah. So that's changed completely. I feel like the more fulfilled you are, the less material things you need. And then you kind of make more peace with money, because it's not something that you need so much of to feel comfortable and safe and abundant in life. That's one part. But I do still have ambitions to make a lot of money, because I do think money is a good thing. And I think it's something that can provide a lot of power and influence that I can use for good in this world. And I can help more people and I can do more with money. And that's something that's even hard for me to say, because I've had these negative opinions about money, really resented money growing up, because I was in a high school that was like more low socioeconomic area of Los Angeles. And I came from an upper class family, and I was bullied for my dad having money, and I was seen as different and like spoiled. And, she doesn't have real problems in life, even though I was going through a lot in my household. It was like completely just, everyone would just write off any of my problems because I'm driving a nice car and I have a nice house. So there was a part of me that always resented money. My dad used money as a condition for me to be who he wants me to be for a lot of my life. If you're not going to be a lawyer, I'm not going to pay for this, or I'm not going to help you with that. And at some point I said, okay, I don't want any money from you. I want to be fully financially independent. I want to have full freedom, which was really scary for me. Not because he was paying for a lot, but because that safety net was like obviously very comfortable. And today, as I go through my path being financially independent, there is a lot of fear that comes up for me that, I won't be able to make enough and I have to make more, or how am I going to buy a house? Do I even want a house? Like all these things that come up for me, I realize that I have completely absorbed my dad's mentality on money, which comes from, like I said, survival mode. An immigrant has survival mentality and has to pay the bills or will be on the street. Luckily for me, I don't think that's the case that I live in reality. So I still have that within myself, and I'm trying to let go of that. I've realized that money is energy. It's a relationship you have with it. It's a it's a thing that you can unpack and go deeper and deeper into. And I'm starting to do that work, even though it's something that I've really not wanted to do for a long, long time. Yeah. But I've been called to go down that path now and heal my relationship with money so that I can attract more of it from a place of peace and not.
Yeah. I like how you said like it's a relationship, because I think like everything, these relationships, we take them to one extreme or the other, and I think society has taken money to the extreme. And when you come to understand that you don't really want to look at it the way you do, there is this first glance of like, oh, I don't need money. Like for me personally, I was like, I don't need it, I don't want it. Yeah. But then you're kind of like, that's not practical.
That's not good either. Yeah.
That's not good either. You're on the other end of the extreme. So I like how you said it's kind of finding this acceptance of peace with money. Like I don't need to get extreme things to fulfill me or to make me happy. I'm going to use money with peace, right? Like, as it relates to who I am as a person. But I totally understand. It's funny because my dad's an immigrant too, so I completely everything you're saying. It's actually crazy how much relationship I have to it. Different issues in our life, but it's the same exact thing. So it's just so interesting to hear that. Number one, the similarities of like that kind of mindset is so prevalent in that situation. But number two, I completely understand with the whole money thing of just like needing to decondition yourself from it, but also finding a middle ground,
new healthy relationship with it. It's like
exactly.
You have to unlearn, and then you have to create a relationship with it. And actually leaving America has reminded me that it's not that extreme in other places. Really, nowhere that I've been in the last 3 months that I left LA do I feel the pressure that I felt being in LA to make more money. I actually am making more money than most people around me and feel like, wow, I'm just more grateful for what I am making, because in LA it feels like there's always someone that has more and everyone's chasing more.
So much
and more
comparing,
and more.
wanting mind.
America, I'm telling you, it's a thing. Like I was in Greece recently and people have really like, they have nothing when it comes to like materialism. But I was like, the collective energy is of such happiness and joy and love that I'm like, they are way richer than the people I was surrounded by in LA. They are way, way richer, genuinely wealthy people who appreciate the meals that they're eating and appreciate their experiences. It really feels like at this point in America, or at least in my ecosystem, what I see online and the people in my environment, it's like even the nicest hotel isn't enough. Even the nicest vacation, they're just sitting there and waiting for the next thing, or just thinking about how it could be better, or, you know, just, it's just the next thing. You know, it's not really letting yourself enjoy life. So what is wealth, right? I think we have to redefine wealth for ourselves. And money is a part of that. And it's okay to want money. Money is great. Money is freedom. Money gives you more time with friends and family and lets you be free. But you have to, in most cases, most of us have to unlearn what we've learned so far and create a whole different relationship with this piece of paper.
I think redefining what wealth means to you is huge. Of saying like, there's this person who has $1 in their wallet who's enjoying their meal for someone who has $100 in their wallet, and they're like, oh, like I had this last night, this isn't good. Like redefining what wealth means to you. It's like a wealth of experiences, a wealth of presence, and a wealth of being content and being happy with where you're at. And I think that's a good reminder and a good wake up call, especially for we're in a similar ecosystem as what you're describing in LA. We're in New York, so it's like always chasing the dollar, and that becomes exhausting, like mentally exhausting, emotionally exhausting, and like spiritually exhausting, because it's just not sustainable. It's not.
No,
and
it's not.
It leaves you poor. It leaves you not feeling good about your experiences and depleted.
Yeah.
For
and
sure,
I also just
for
like
sure.
say too, I really liked how you said like people there are more rich. And I don't know if you're talking literally, but I interpret it as like in the rhetorical sense of like they're rich, their lives are rich. Like let's redefine what wealth means. Right? Let's redefine what wealth means. Like wealth doesn't need to mean how much money that you have in your bank account. Wealth can mean what do you contribute to the world, how happy you are. So I think that if we can stop, you know, associating our life with money, wondering what we do in our life if money was no object, something I've talked a lot. I know Alan Watts has a lot about this. I really like his stuff on this. But just like, how would we live differently? And I definitely have been trying to think about that more. So I just really like what you said. And I think it's awesome how you're deconditioning this to kind of get to a healthy place with that.
Yeah, for sure. I used to feel like I'll never be as rich as my dad, because my dad did create a lot of financial success for himself, working really hard, and I'll never apologize for that. I'm proud of him and I think it's amazing, but I always felt like I'll never be successful until I make enough money to be like him. And I'm slowly starting to realize I'm richer than him in many ways. Maybe not in my bank account, but in my ability to live stress-free and anxiety-free and not in scarcity, and to experience the abundance that is in my life, and not to constantly focusing on what is lacking and what I need more of. So I feel very blessed, because I think at my age, he didn't have the privilege to experience this wealth that I experience. And I've just redefined what wealth means to me. And part of it is also money. So that's okay also, of course.
That's amazing. I think that's a really good way to close out this conversation, because I think it really brings us full circle, right? We started talking, you telling us how hard this journey has been for you, with the pressure of your dad, pressure of your family, pressure of your own self, detaching from that, working through that, and then here you are able to understand that you have so much wealth in this new way that you're defining it. And that's so amazing to hear. Seriously, it's really awesome, and I really enjoyed hearing from you. But I think like spreading this message is so important, because it can help so many other people live true to themselves, live authentically. And I guess to kind of close out the conversation, we'll ask, so our whole motto is live life unpotted. unboxed to who you are. So what kind of advice would you give to someone to live life unpotted who's already stuck or feels stuck? Sorry, because no one's actually stuck.
Wow. I feel like if you get quiet enough and still enough with yourself, the truth has always been there. It's always there. It's not something you have to find. It's not something you have to work hard for. It's not something you have to earn. You don't have to look so far, really. It's about finding enough quiet and stillness within yourself to let that part of you speak to you. And I would say start with radical honesty, just being radically honest. Share it with a journal, share it with someone you feel comfortable with, just owning whatever that truth is. And if it takes you 5 years to live out that truth, that's okay, because the truth I'm living right now was a very small whisper in the back of my mind 8 years ago, 5 years ago, that I just continued to water, right? I continued to pay attention to. I feel like at some point people just completely reject that voice or gaslight themselves or belittle it and just put it in a box and shove it under their bed and think that it's not going to be there if they just ignore it, but it will not go anywhere. It's going to be there, and it will be there. And just ask yourself when you go through at the end of your life and you reopen this box, because it's going to be there, what you want to tell yourself. Did you try? Did you listen to it at all? Or did you just hide it tucked away thinking that it's going to go somewhere? So I feel like whatever that truth is in whatever area of your life that you feel that you don't have the courage to live by, just keep paying attention to it, honoring it, not rejecting it. Give it time. Be patient with yourself. Be compassionate with the journey, because following this truth has taken me up and down a roller coaster of life that is insane. It's not been easy. It has not been easy, but it's always going to be rewarding and fulfilling in the end. And the last thing I'll say is that every time you do this, you're not just doing it for yourself. Every single person around you is a little bit more free when you free yourself. I see it in my friends. I see it in every person I come in contact with. It's like you're giving people permission to do the same. It's not a selfish thing. Sometimes it feels selfish. Sometimes it feels like, why do I deserve all of this good? And you remember this is actually something that's, you're being of service to others when you free yourself in this world. So that's something I would say.
Wow. Thank you for closing with that. That was
amazing.
That was really great.
Yay.
But yeah, I think it's so amazing when you start realize life is not to be easy. It's not the goal to be happy all the time, but it's to be accepting yourself, conducting yourself, and doing that to allow other people to do it too.
Yeah. And not to continue a new tangent, but that was just like a very insightful piece of information to end on. One of our past guests, Michael, what he said was that it's doing a disservice to the world and it's selfish to not live true to who you are and your authentic self, because you're doing not only a disservice to you, but to what you could be providing to the world, to other people, visibility, things like that. So I'd love to see that message still lives through our conversation today, because that's really what we try to communicate to people, is that the greater risk is not being authentic to yourself at the end of the day.
For sure. And that comes with challenges too. I hear what you said that he said, and I'm like, oh, it feels so good to hear someone else say that, because sometimes I do feel like, sometimes I feel guilty. Like I feel this guilt of like, I really feel free, and I see so many people who are not free. And sometimes I feel like maybe it would be easier for me to just be unfree again too.
Yes. But then you're perpetuating the cycle, and then they're going to say
exactly.
stop.
And then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to free myself. It'll trigger some people. Some people will not like it. Exactly. But hopefully some people are inspired by it. So
exactly. Well, this has been such an amazing chat. I mean, I really love talking to you.
You guys are so adorable and really have like the cutest little energy. And I love the name of your podcast, because you guys literally look like two little flowers.
Oh my God. Is it the headphones? We just got because they're huge. They're like,
you guys like look like two little daisies. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like
Sophie's actually changing her name to Daisy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, great. Wonderful.
Taylor, do you want to, as we close out, do you want to just let people know where they can find you? Give your little pitch.
Sure. So you can find me at Life by Taylor on both Instagram and TikTok. And my podcast is the Life by Taylor podcast. It's on all streaming platforms. And I hope to connect with anyone who listens to this and feels like this resonates with them. If you just want to have a conversation or ask for resources or advice, you can always DM me. I'd love to help in any way I can.
For sure. And we'll put all that information in the show notes.
Yep. You can find it.
But
Wonderful.
Taylor, thank you for taking the time. I could keep going on for hours, so we'll have to continue this conversation another time.
Well, yeah, on season 3.
Season 3. There you go. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, Taylor. And we'll talk to you soon.